not able to. So when Leslie told me that she is looking for somebody who could train her volunteers to be able to sew cloth pads, I said, I know just the person. So Jessica Wayne is our special guest this afternoon, and she will be guiding us through a very easy tutorial on how to sew cloth pads. This session will also be recorded so that you will have an opportunity to watch it again slower and maybe pause it and take notes. So don't be anxious if the slide progresses and you didn't take enough notes like you would have wanted. It will be recorded for you to view later at your convenience. We do encourage you to write down any questions that you have, and we will take all the questions at the end of the session. Once Jessica is done, we'll go and do a round robin and take questions from everyone. So without further ado, here is Jessica Wayne, our special guest this afternoon.
And I think she lost a connection. Of course. We'll just have to be patient.
Oh no, I can still hear everyone. I hope everyone can still hear me. So
we can, but we can't see you. I can't see your video.
Can anyone hear me? Oh, darn it. Okay. Okay. Let's see if I can share our PowerPoint. Give it a try.
If not, Jessica.
Also, thank you, Christine, for the introduction.
Jessica, yes. I have the PowerPoint, so I could share it if you just want to talk about if it's the same one we had the other day. And then you can just tell me when to change pages if that's helpful.
Oh.
Why don't I do that? Let's see here.
Her video looks frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
All right, hold on. All right, Jessica. Oops, whoa, it's going too fast. Oh, your screen is back, so I will. Go ahead, Jessica.
Oh. All right, let's see here.
Technology is so much fun. All right.
I know it, isn't it?
You are ready to go, Jess.
Okay. Okay, I switched from my laptop to my phone. I hope this will work a little bit better, but we'll see. All right. So to start off with, Christine graciously called me a seamstress. I don't know if I would call myself a seamstress. I'm intermediate at best, but I found a way to make these pads work. So hopefully my instructions are easy to follow for everyone. And if you have any questions, write them down. Don't feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer them. But so when I was approached by Christine for making these pads, we had a discussion about materials, preference for design, that type of thing. We went through a couple prototypes, but this one seems to be the one that works the best. So there's a couple different ways to create the pads. It's entirely up to your preference. I will talk about the pros and cons of each style, but let's see here. So first, considering supplies, the pattern that I used, that I modified, came from a website and a woman named Luna Wolf. She had originally made the pattern to sell and distribute and sell her own cloth pads from, and she decided to release the pattern for everyone to use. So thankfully, it's a free pattern. You can use the link in this website to go directly to it to print off your own copies of the pattern. There's a few different sizes, and there's really thorough instructions to make them as she does. This is, like I said, a little bit modified. So let's see here. Also in the notes, as you can see, I tend to use the 9-inch pad as a standard. Of course, every woman's different, so you might find that the larger or smaller pads are something that work better for everyone on an average. I believe Christine told me that the length for the 9-inch ones seemed to work well for most women that she distributed them to. So the materials that we use most often with these ones are going to be cotton flannel, 100% cotton flannel. Primarily because it's a really soft material. It's very absorbent. It's pretty easy to come by, and it's easy to upcycle other garments that are flannel into these cloth pads. The sewing tools you are going to want for this one is obviously a sewing machine is going to make things a lot easier. They can be hand sewn, but it will be a little bit more time consuming. You are going to want your iron, thread, scissors, seam ripper is also a great tool to have, pins. If there's any other, sewing helpers that aren't necessarily a standard, but something that you found that you like to use when you sew, you're more than welcome to. The other thing that we use is snaps for these. You can certainly use Velcro if you have Velcro on hand and don't need or want to buy the tools involved in putting snaps on the pads. They seem to hold up pretty well. Personally, I've never used Velcro, but it's certainly an option. There is a very nice kit that I found on the website, online, or you can find it at a lot of local chain fabric stores. The cam snaps, they have a really nice starter set. So if you don't have any, but you're interested in using them, I would definitely recommend those. Okay, as far as fabric, like I said, the ones that I make completely out of 100% cotton flannel. The reusable pad making world has expanded quite a bit, and I found a lot of resources online on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, that really are great at going into detail about other fabrics that you can use and layer for pads for both absorbency and water resistance, so to keep from leaking and that kind of issue. So for a backing, which would be what you would put on the very bottom of the pad that would come in contact with underwear, you can use heavier fleece, ripstop nylon, windpro fleece. Those are all materials that would use normally for a windbreaker. PUL, laminated nylon, and the windpro with DWR, those are all waterproof. The PUL, you'll see used often in cloth diapers. That's going to be another waterproof item that's really handy, but not quite as breathable. So that's something to consider also. For absorbency, you can also use a product called Zorb, which is really nice. It's very thin, but it also absorbs a lot of liquids. So that's something that people like to use a lot because it kind of cuts down on the bulk while kind of maintaining that absorbency that you want. You can also use microfiber terry, fleece, terry toweling, bird's eye paper, diaper twill, excuse me. All of those are really great natural fibers. Usually have cotton or bamboo options that are pretty easy to find. Hemp also. So it depends also if you want to use a synthetic or if you want to use a natural fiber. So on the next slide for topping fabrics, that's going to be the fabric that comes in contact with the skin. You want to consider comfortable fabric, obviously, because there's going to be obviously contact with the skin. There's going to be a little bit of movement, a little bit of friction. So that's why minky, micro fleece, suede, some people use velour. Those are all really great options. So if you have some of these things on hand that you're looking for, you know, something to use them for, that you've been waiting for that project, those are good things to consider as far as top fabrics. So onto the construction. This is where I've adapted the pattern for the pads that I've been making. So originally the Luna Wolf pattern is made with two pieces of an outer fabric, a backing and a top. There's a core that's made of multiple layers of fabric and sewn together to go inside of the pad to create that absorbent layer similar to a you know, synthetic store-bought pad. It's got the layers inside of it. This one's a little bit different in that I use the main pattern, but also if you see that red line there, I created a second copy of the pad that I printed out, and I cut a piece to make what I refer to as pockets, for lack of a better word, to go on either end of the pad. So this is going to create an open design. So you're going to have an exposed core. So any moisture that's there is going to go directly into the core rather than going through the top layer into the core. So when I originally created these pad packs for Christine, I would make 3 of these to go into a pack. So now onto the core. The core being exposed, for the 9-inch pattern, I cut a piece of fabric roughly 8 inches by 22 inches long. And then I just did a quick exposed seam hem around the sides. This just keeps the fabric from fraying and falling apart. There is, once you wash it, there is some fraying, but it's pretty minimal. So the benefit to this, having this long piece of fabric, is that you are able to fold it or modify it any way you'd like to fit into the pad to best meet your absorbency needs. So also, if you're going to create a longer pad, so you want to do the 10.5-inch pattern, you would want to increase the width of the fabric accordingly. So if I use an 8-inch piece of fabric width-wise for the 9-inch pad, I would want to go maybe to a 9.5-inch width for a 10.5-inch pad. So in a pack for the pads, along with the 3 pad bodies, I include 8 cores to go with them so that you can change those throughout the day and you don't have to wait to wash some more in order to use them. So you have some in rotation. All right, so things to keep in mind for the construction. You want to think about comfort. Think about where stitches are going to be placed, how soft or rough the fabric is that you're using. You always want to think about sensitivity. This is a sensitive area we're talking about, so you want to make sure that you're able to kind of meet everyone in the middle compromise and make sure things are as comfortable as they can be. You also want to consider staining and coloring. Obviously, there's going to be some staining with these pads. If you're able to, I would choose a darker fabric or something that's got a pattern to it or something that might hide that staining a little bit more. I mean, you're definitely welcome to use white fabric. just consider that there will probably be some staining involved. You also, I'm sure you all know, want to pre-wash your fabric. Anything that you're going to sew should be washed ahead of time to, you know, prevent shrinking once everything's sewn together, because of course if it shrinks after it's sewn together, then you're going to get warping and things won't look and fit together as they should. If you are to use that Zorb material I mentioned earlier, you don't want to wash that ahead of time actually. And generally that's going to be used as a core product anyway, so you're not going to be sewing separate pieces together, so you know, changing in the material isn't going to matter quite so much. And Zorb, once you wash it, honestly doesn't really change size or shape. So all right, so this first sewing option, and I have some examples here on standby once we're done with this PowerPoint to show you. This one is going to be construction of the pad with turned seams. So you're going to sew everything right or wrong side out, and then flip it and right side in, press the seams, and then you're going to have a really nice finished edge on the pad. So you also want to consider seam allowance and that type of thing. The one downside to this style is that you're going to lose some of the width and some of the coverage that you might see with the other option I'll show you with an exposed hem or exposed seam. It's definitely a pattern that was made to have a seam allowance that will that you can make this pad with and still have good coverage. But if you're looking for something a little wider, you can either cut your fabric a little wider to allow for it, or you can go with the exposed seam that I will mention in the next slide. So this next sewing option is the exposed edges, like as I said. This one, the pad body is going to have exposed edges similarly to the core fabric. Of course, you can definitely, if you prefer that finished edge, you can roll the seams for the pad core as well. But this is going to give you just a little bit more bang for your buck as far as using all of your fabric to the best of your ability. It's going to have an unfinished edge though. It doesn't look quite as polished, but from feedback, I've had a couple people tell me that they don't mind so much because they're the only ones that are going to see these pads anyway. So the other benefit to this one is it's not quite as bulky on the edges and at the seams, because it's just two pieces sewn together and you don't have to worry about the bulk of your finished seam that is rolled in. So, you know, if there's somebody that's particularly sensitive as far as pressure points and that type of thing, they might prefer this option because it's a little flatter. So some other helpful information. Hand washing or machine washing on a gentle cycle with cold or cool water is your best option. If you are going to give care instructions, I would definitely recommend that they wash it in cold water. Of course, you know, the old washing tricks, peroxide will get blood stains out, that type of thing. Some women like to soak their pads once they remove them. Once they're soiled, they put them in some kind of container to soak them before they wash them, which is also a good option. I've also heard that setting them out in the sun for a few hours is really good at breaking up stains. So for drying, if you use the snap option, there's this handy little trick I learned from other people that have sewn their own cloth pads. You can join once they're washed, you can join the snaps together end to end and hang them like from your shower rod, like in the picture, and they air dry, which is really nice too. You can dry these in the dryer. I recommend air drying them though, especially, you know, for that stain factor. So those stains, if there are any that remain, aren't going to get set in. The last page, I just have a couple more resources for you if you're interested in them. There is a Facebook group called Sewing Cloth Menstrual Pads that I found extremely helpful. There's men and women on there that create cloth pads. Some of them are for their own use, some of them are to sell. There's some really beautiful, I didn't ever think I would call a pad beautiful, but I've seen some really beautiful creations from some of those men and women in there. So if you ever have a question, if you ever want to have some inspiration, if you want to go above and beyond and make some really beautiful cloth pads, it's a really good resource, and they have a lot of files and links in there as well. Of course, there's the Luna Wolf pattern. She's got some really helpful tutorials and pictures in there, so if you find yourself stuck somehow, you can always use that resource as well. And then, like I said and recommended, those cam snaps. They are plastic snaps, but they do have metal snap options available as well. It's a family-owned company, and for your first order, if you order through their website, you can get a coupon. So it might be a good option for you as well. I added these pictures here. So the first one there, this says the 9-inch main pattern. That's the one I've used quite a bit, pretty heavily. You can see my my marks on there from cutting out lots of patterns. So the picture in the middle is obviously the pattern. The piece off to the upper right-hand corner is the piece I cut from a second pattern in order to make those pockets I was referring to. Next to it there is one that I've prepped to sew with a finished hem, finished seam. So I've notched the curves and it's all pinned together, so you can see what that looks like. These two are the raw seam option. So this one has been folded up for a little while. It's been in storage, so it's not laying flat, but you can see that it's got, I did a zigzag stitch around the edge, a really nice tight zigzag stitch, and so it's got the exposed edges right there along the edge that I trimmed back right almost to the stitches themselves. The last picture there is with the exposed core on the inside, just so you can kind of see what that looks like put together.
So, are there any questions? That was great. Thanks, Jessica. Let me see. I don't know how to unmute everyone, but go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Now, are you going, can we get the instructions, or are you going to email us these written instructions, or what are you going to do about
I will email,
that?
I will email
Okay. Okay.
I will also include a link. There's a local fabric shop in Lansing called Seams, and they have the Zorb material and PV. What was it? I can't remember. Their waterproof material.
The PUL.
Yeah.
I was wondering,
Go ahead. Oh, you're unmuted. You're muted. Hold on. Go ahead.
is that good?
Yep, you're good.
I was wondering, typically, how many pads and core pieces you provide, like per person?
So the main body part, I usually in a pack, I'd put three of the main body pieces in there, and I would do 8 cores.
And so the main, actually, if you had to wash, you probably have to wash everything every time, right? I mean, because
Probably yes.
okay. Why would you have more core pieces? Or just so that you could add, like, put several pieces of core in one?
Yeah, you could layer it. I guess it probably depends on the person, but you might be able to use a body for a whole day rather than switching it out every time that you needed to change it up or anything. So
That's because the body would be water, or have some resistance or water resistance, and just seems still it would be kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on the person. So
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I have used Jessica's pads, and I rarely have to use two of the core on a whole day. So I always have two to, even if I have to wash one every evening, I always have like one clean one to use at night and another one to take in the morning. And once you get in the rotation, it's actually quite easy, and it works quite well actually. Like, again, it depends on the flow. If the person has really heavy flow, that their flow is getting on the core every time they have to change, they may need more. But I did find that the three work quite well. But granted, I don't have a very heavy period, and I don't have a very long period either. I only have a 4-day period. So, and I would consider it like medium flow. So I'm probably not a good example, but I didn't used to change my core all day. I mean, the piece that snaps on the underwear, I just used to change the core and put it in a Ziploc and then change it when I get home. But I use mine in addition to a menstrual cup too, so maybe that's why. So yeah, but at night, when I don't want to use my menstrual cup, I just use the cloth pads, and they work quite well. But I can see why somebody with a heavier flow may need like 4 or 5, but it depends on their use. But I think that's a great question.
Mhm.
Somebody asked, is there a downside to using sewn-in snaps?
I haven't come across any.
Yeah, me either.
The only
Yeah, I can show you. So I grabbed my handy tools here. So you have 4 pieces. Let me hold it up here. You have 4 pieces. You have the outside snap pieces, and then what they call the male and female sides that go together in here to snap together. So it's really just using the plastic itself to create a lock, a sort of locking mechanism to it. So there's no sewing involved in that, and they're pretty hard to get off. I've messed a couple of snaps up, and they're they're not fun to try to get back off the fabric. So I haven't had any fall off or anything like that. So
one thing you need to make sure is that the snaps will, they're not both facing the same way when you're putting it together. And then she also says, do you use the waterproof fabric on both the pad body and the core?
I just put it on the pad body. So if you're going to put it, let's see, I have my handy dandy pad here. I would just put it on this side as the backing.
Cool. Any other questions? No? All right. I did put the link for Seams Fabric in the chat, but I'll also include that in the package that I send to y'all. Jessie, who owns Seams, is very helpful, and you can always ask her for help too. And they do drop or curbside pickup if you need to, or you can go into the store. Yes, HWP will be distributing some of these. It still takes a while to get people used to alternative options from what they're used to, but we're going to do what we can. I like it because it's a more environmentally friendly thing. It's also physically better for you. So that's my... All right. Oops, hold on. You're muted again, Chris. There you go.
Kathy, it always has a line again. Anyway, I wondered if there's any issue with odor control with these. And if there is, how to help that.
Can you say that one more time? I'm not sure I heard all of it.
Okay, I was just wondering if there's an issue with odor control with
Oh,
these, and if there is a way to, if there is to control that.
right. Christine, we're getting personal here. Have you had any issues with odor control with your pads?
Not that I would have, in addition to like what a normal pad is. I think there is a natural odor that you might smell if you take too long to change your core out of your cloth pad. Yeah, I think unless you left it in too long or, yeah. And then of course, because you're having to wash, some people may say, I don't really want to smell that as I wash it. I don't know. So, yeah, because they're used to just rolling it up and putting it in the trash, whereas here there's a little more contact time with the menstrual blood. So that's a personal kind of comfort level for people. But I personally, because I also use menstrual cups and there's cleaning element with those, I kind of just got used to it. And, but that's a great question because that may be a transition for some people.
As far as having these cores be just one piece of fabric that you can fold over as many times as you want, it's not going to trap the odors and the bacteria quite as much as maybe a layered sewn together core would. That's kind of one of the upsides of these exposed cores is that you can unroll them and rinse them out really well, and you're not going to have anything trapped inside.
Do you normally also give these out with instructions, how to use them and, clean them, etc.?
I have given a little informational sheet with cleaning instructions. I have not done any like how-to instructions as far as use and changing and that sort of thing, but
HWP will when we hand them out.
Okay.
When you take the core out, do you throw that in a baggie and wash it later? Do you rinse it out at that time? What works well?
I guess it depends on where you're at. If you're out and about, maybe in a store or something like that. I know a lot of women keep what they call a wet bag with them, even if it's a Ziploc bag or a reusable fabric bag that has that PUL or something waterproof on the inside. If you're able to rinse it out, and stick it in that bag for later, that's fine. At home it might be a little bit easier because you're right there at the sink. You've got your privacy. You can rinse it out and, do what you need to do with it. But yeah, the wet bag thing is certainly a handy thing to have.
The other thing is, I've heard of using like those like Tupperware containers and putting it in there with some water and then letting it sit.
Well, I would think if public place, maybe if nothing else, you flush the toilet and just a rinse to flush it out in a clean toilet. Because rather than in a sink, I mean, I can't imagine doing it in a sink, but just to rinse it out right there in the restroom.
That's certainly an option. I saw that somebody asked a question about light incontinence. I'll be honest, I just had a baby 5 months ago, and so I made some, that were a little bit bigger and heavier for once I had the baby, and I have to say they work pretty well for light incontinence too.
That's great. All right, any other questions? I will send out all the information probably Monday. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me and I'll make sure that we can ask Jessica if we need to. And Christine, do you got anything, or Jess, do you have anything to say at the end?
No, thank you all. And I'm sure the people that you serve will love them. We certainly can't wait to start distributing them again. So, yeah, I can't wait to hear how well this goes for everybody who tries to sew them.
All right.
Thank you so much for doing this. It was really helpful, and as Lizney knows, we were getting ready to do this, and Lizney was going to come to one of our meetings when the quarantine happened. So, you know, and we made that. So we've been busy, but you know, it's great to now think about this again. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that, you know, there's still people out there that are busy making things. And I
Yes,
wish I
thank you very much.
Yeah, two children was keeping me busy. So
Awesome. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too. Be safe.
Bye.